always been a creature of the night. Not in a spooky, vampire kind of way, but in a practical, I prefer sleeping when the sun is out kind of way. So when the opportunity came up to work the night shift at St. Jude's Hospital, I jumped at it. Less traffic, quieter halls, and a certain peaceful hush that settles over everything once the day shift scurries home. Or so I thought. Tonight, that peace feels stretched thin, a fragile membrane about to burst. The hospital is an old building, as most are in this city. Sturdy brick, a bit of that classic turn-of-the-century architecture that always feels like it's holding a secret. I actually like that about it. Gives it character, you know. My station is on the 3rd floor, emergency overflow, mostly. Lots of observation beds, a few rooms for short-term admissions. It's usually pretty calm after midnight. Most of the real drama happens on the 1st floor, in the main ER. Up here, it's just the quiet hum of machines, the occasional muffled cough, and the rhythmic squeak of my own shoes as I do my rounds. But tonight is different. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, during my 2 a.m. rounds. I was checking on Mrs. Henderson in room 307. She's a sweet old lady, admitted for dehydration, talks a lot about her prize-winning petunias. As I was adjusting her IV, I caught a glint in the fluorescent light. Out of the corner of my eye, something on the ceiling. I dismissed it at first, probably just a drip from one of the ancient pipes. Nothing unusual in a building this old. So I nodded to Mrs. Henderson, wished her pleasant dreams of floral glory, and continued my rounds. Then I saw it again, this time in the hallway, near the old elevator bank that's always out of service. A dark, viscous streak, tracing a path down the pale yellow paint of the wall. It looked sticky. I reached out, my fingers brushing against it. Cold and thick, too thick for water. My stomach did a little lurch. I pulled my hand back, a prickle of unease starting to bloom in my chest. What was that? I'm trained to be rational, to assess, to problem solve. So my first thought was a burst pipe, maybe some rusty water, or an old stain that had just decided to become visible tonight. But it definitely wasn't there on my earlier rounds. I'm meticulous. I've seen enough hospital grime to know the difference between old and new. This was fresh, and it had an odd metallic tang in the air that I couldn't quite place, like pennies or something else. Something I didn't want to think about. I pulled out my phone, clicked on the flashlight, and aimed it at the ceiling directly above the streak. Nothing obvious, just faded acoustic tiles, some with water marks, but nothing actively dripping. My eyes went to the wall opposite the streak. More of them. Small, isolated spots, like freckles, but dark, almost black in the dim hospital light. They weren't there before. I was sure of it. A chill ran down my spine, even though the hospital was warm, almost stuffy. This wasn't just a leaky pipe. This was something else. My mind, usually a well-oiled machine of medical knowledge and protocols, started veering off into territory I usually reserved for late-night horror movies. This can't be happening. Not here. Not in a hospital. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. My first impulse was to report it. Call facilities, building maintenance. But what would I even say? There's something on the walls that looks like I couldn't even finish the thought. I needed to see more. I needed to be sure. My eyes drifted upwards, towards the ceiling again, then higher. We were on the 3rd floor. The 4th floor held the administrative offices and storage, mostly empty at this hour. I wondered if anything was up there that could be causing this. Maybe a spilled cleaning solution, some sort of chemical. But the smell, that metallic tang, it just kept nagging at me. I decided to do a quick loop of the 3rd floor, paying special attention to the ceilings and walls. The streaks weren't everywhere, thankfully, but I found another few, more localized, near the nurse's station, just outside the break room, like someone had flicked something upwards. And then, the worst one, right above the medication cart, a smear, almost a handprint shape, but distorted, as if something had been dragged across the ceiling tile and then dripped down. It was unmistakably reddish-brown now, even in the dim light, and it was still slowly, agonizingly slowly, expanding. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't rust. This wasn't dirty water. This looked like blood. Fresh blood. My mind screamed the word, even as I fought to reject it. But the evidence was staring me in the face. A creeping, chilling realization. I went back to the nurse's station, my breathing shallow. My coworker, Sarah, was at the computer, eyes glued to a patient chart. She was a no-nonsense type, unflappable. Good. I needed unflappable right now. Or maybe I needed someone to tell me I was crazy. "Hey, Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, but it came out a little too strained. She grunted, not looking up. "What's up, Alex?" Mrs. Petrov ringing her bell again. She's a fiend for those crackers. No, not Mrs. Petrov. Something else. "Have you noticed anything weird tonight?" She finally looked up, her brow furrowed. "Weird? Like what?" Another ghost story from the old-timer nurses. I swear, this place gives them too much free time. She gestured vaguely at the empty hallway. No, not ghosts. More like a leak. From upstairs. I tried to sound nonchalant, but my hands were clenching into fists, nails digging into my palms. She blinked, then actually looked at the ceiling above us. Her gaze followed mine to the medication cart, to the smear. Her eyes widened just a fraction. "What in the, is that a coffee spill?" From admin, I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't think so, Sarah. It looks like blood." Her face went pale. Sarah, who had seen it all, who could calmly tell a family a loved one had passed, who could stitch a gash without blinking, she went pale. Her eyes darted around the ceiling, then back to me, the question unspoken, but screaming in her gaze. "I'm going upstairs," I said, the words surprising even myself. It was a terrible idea. Every bone in my body was screaming at me to call security, to call someone, anyone, to simply run away. But the nurse in me, the part that steps into the unknown, insisted on seeing, on understanding. Sarah's hand shot out, grabbing my arm. "Alex, no. You can't just. What if someone's hurt? You need to call it in. Let security handle it." Her voice was trembling now. The unflappable Sarah was gone. "And tell them what? That the walls are bleeding. They'll send me to psych. I need to know what it is first. Just a quick look. I won't go in if it's bad." The lie felt hollow even as I said it. Bad was an understatement. She hesitated, her grip still firm. "Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll call if you see anything, anything at all." "I promise," I said, pulling away. I didn't know if I could keep it. My heart was thudding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. The stairs to the 4th floor were rarely used. They were on the far side of the building, dark and narrow. The hospital preferred the elevator, so these felt like a forgotten passageway. Each step creaked under my weight, the sound amplified in the oppressive silence. The air grew colder, an unnatural chill that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I pulled my badge out, ready to swipe it for access. But as I reached the door, I saw it. It was already ajar, just barely. A sliver of darkness lay beyond. My breath hitched. My hand froze on the cold metal of the door handle. It was unlocked. Someone was up here, or something. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to run, to call security, to get Sarah and the other nurses and barricade ourselves in the patient wing. But a morbid curiosity, a twisted sense of duty, pushed me forward. I pushed the door open slowly, the hinges groaning in protest, the sound echoing through the cavernous darkness of the 4th floor. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of dust and something else. Something metallic, the same scent that had been seeping into the 3rd floor. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight, its beam cutting a shaky path through the darkness. The 4th floor was mostly storage rooms, old medical equipment, filing cabinets, and the administrative offices, all locked down. Or so I thought. The hallway stretched out before me, long and narrow, lined with doors. The only light came from my phone, casting long, dancing shadows. I walked slowly, carefully, each step deliberate, my ears straining to pick up any sound. Nothing but the frantic beat of my own heart. Then I saw it. Directly above where the worst of the drips had been on the 3rd floor, a dark, wet patch on the ceiling tile, and another. And then I noticed the floor. It was slightly sticky under my shoe. My flashlight beam dropped down, a dark trail, a thin, glistening line leading from one of the office doors, the door to Dr. Armitage's office. He was the head of cardiology, a pompous, arrogant man, but utterly meticulous. He would never leave his door ajar. I approached it, my breath catching in my throat. The door was slightly ajar, just like the stairwell door, and from the crack, a faint, sickly sweet smell wafted out. It wasn't just metallic now. It was something else, something organic. I pushed the door open, just a crack, and peered inside. The office was dark. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating rows of bookshelves, a large mahogany desk, and a plush leather chair. All perfectly neat, too neat, everything in its place. And then I saw it. A dark, spreading puddle on the plush carpet beneath the desk. It wasn't red in the dim light, but a deeper, murky brown, almost black. It looked like ancient, congealed oil, but it was definitely liquid, and it was expanding, slowly, inexorably, seeping into the fibers of the carpet. My gaze moved up from the puddle, following an invisible line. It led to the side of the desk, where a dark, viscous streak trickled down the polished wood, then onto the leg, and finally into the growing pool on the floor. It was coming from somewhere above the desk. I forced myself to step further into the room, my flashlight beam sweeping up. The ceiling above Dr. Armitage's desk was the source. A crack, thin and jagged, stretched across the acoustic tile, and from it, a thick, glistening substance oozed out. It was moving, almost imperceptibly, forming a slow, deliberate drop. It looked alive. My stomach heaved. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. This wasn't just a person bleeding. This was something unnatural. My mind, which had been valiantly trying to rationalize everything, finally broke. My flashlight beam, trembling now, flickered upwards, trying to see beyond the stained ceiling tile. Was it a burst pipe on the roof? An animal caught in the ventilation system? My rational brain was grasping at straws, desperate to escape the terrifying implications. But a dark, chilling thought emerged, not from my fear, but from a deeper, primal place. What if it wasn't just leaking down? What if it was actively seeping? As if whatever was on the roof or in the walls was alive and trying to get in. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my ears. The hospital suddenly felt like a tomb. The quiet hum of the machines on the third floor now sounded like a distant, mocking whisper. The entire building seemed to hold its breath. I had to get out. I had to report this, to call someone stronger, braver than me. But standing there in that dark, cold office, with the unholy ooze dripping from the ceiling, I knew that whatever was happening, it wasn't just a simple leak. And I was alone, utterly, terrifyingly alone. My phone rang, a sudden, jarring sound that made me jump. It was Sarah. Her name, bold and bright on the screen, was a lifeline. I ripped it to my ear, my voice coming out in a strangled croak. Sarah, I'm on the 4th floor. You won't believe. Alex, thank God. Where are you? Her voice was tight with panic. Something S happening down here. The drips, they're getting worse. And one of the patient's heart monitors, it just flatlined. My blood ran cold. Flatlined. Mrs. Henderson? No, not Mrs. Henderson. Who, Sarah? Who flatlined? Mr. Davies in 305, she gasped. He was stable, Alex. He was sleeping. And his room with the ceiling, it's actually dripping now, right onto his bed. And the other nurses, they saw it too. Oh my God, I don't know what it is, but it's horrible, Alex. The blood. It was affecting the patients. My mind reeled. It wasn't just a mess. It was an active threat, and it was moving. Get out of there, Sarah, I yelled, my voice cracking. Get everyone out. Push them towards the stairs, the main exit. Don't wait for security. Don't wait for anyone. Just get out. I wasn't thinking about protocols anymore. I wasn't thinking about my job. I was thinking about survival, about Mrs. Henderson, about the other patients, about Sarah, and about whatever unspeakable thing was seeping from the ceiling, bleeding into the very fabric of St. Jude's Hospital. I turned and bolted for the door of Dr. Armitage's office, my heart screaming, my legs burning. The silence now was deafening. The building felt like it was closing in around me, the walls themselves groaning, stretching, alive with some unseen horror. As I slammed the office door shut behind me, the last thing I saw in the dark office was a glint, a faint shimmer. On the ceiling near the seeping crack, it wasn't just blood. It was moving too, forming something. Something that looked like an eyeball, slowly, agonizingly opening. I didn't stop to think if it was my imagination. I just ran. Down the dark, creaking stairs, my breath ragged, my mind a chaotic mess of fear and disbelief. This wasn't a medical emergency. This was something else entirely. And it was happening right here in my hospital. St. Jude S. was bleeding, and I was trapped inside. I didn't stop. I just ran. Down the dark, creaking stairs, my breath ragged, my mind a chaotic mess of fear and disbelief. This wasn't a medical emergency. This was something else entirely. And it was happening right here in my hospital. St. Jude's was bleeding, and I was trapped inside. The stairs were an endless tunnel of dread. Each thump of my feet seemed to echo the frantic pounding of my heart. I rounded the corner to the final flight, my eyes fixed on the sliver of light from the 3rd floor. Sarah, Mr. Davies. I had to get to them. I had to get them out. Protocol, rules, consequences. All of it was dust in the wind compared to the overwhelming urge to protect, to survive. I burst through the stairwell door, skidding to a halt. The 3rd floor was a nightmare unfolding. The subtle drips and smears I'd seen earlier were now horrifyingly undeniable. The pale yellow walls near the nurse's station were streaked with thick, dark red, glistening sluggishly. It looked like someone had been throwing buckets of the stuff. My gaze snapped to Mr. Davies' room, 305. The door was open, and I could hear Sarah's panicked voice. "Oh my God," she was repeating, her voice high and strained. I rushed inside, my flashlight beam cutting through the dim room. Mr. Davies was lying in his bed, motionless. His chest was unnaturally still. The heart monitor I'd checked hours ago, the one that had been politely beeping in the background, was indeed flatlined. A horrible straight line. And above him, it was a horror show. The acoustic tile directly over his bed was completely saturated, bulging downwards, weeping thick, dark liquid in a steady, relentless stream. It was dripping right onto his chest, coating the crisp white hospital gown in a sickening, reddish-brown stain. It wasn't dripping anymore, it was pouring. Sarah was standing by the bed, her hands clapped over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Another nurse, Maria, was beside her, looking utterly shell-shocked. Maria was usually the calmest among us, a veteran of countless emergencies, but now her face was ashen, her eyes wide with terror. "He's gone, Alex," Sarah choked out, pointing a trembling finger at Mr. Davies. The monitor just stopped, and then it started dripping, right on him. Her voice was a terrified whisper. I looked at Mr. Davies, then at the pulsating ceiling above him. This wasn't a leak. This was an active, violent outpouring, and it was too late for him. My heart sank, heavy with a terrible mix of grief and profound, bone-deep fear. "We need to evacuate," I said, my voice hoarse, trying to exert some semblance of control. "Now, every patient, get them out. We call security from the ground floor. Tell them there's a biohazard leak, a gas leak, anything. Just get them moving." Maria, still stunned, finally seemed to snap out of it. She nodded, her eyes darting to the hallway. "The other patients, Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Miller, I'll get them," I said, already turning. "Tell Daniel on the 1st floor to open all the emergency exits. Tell him it's a full evacuation. Don't wait for an announcement. Just do it." I ran out of Mr. Davies' room, my flashlight beam sweeping desperately across the hallway. The bleeding had spread. It was on the walls, on the floor, in hideous, viscous puddles. It was emanating from everywhere around the nurses' station, as if the very structure of the hospital was weeping. The metallic smell was overpowering now, mixed with that sickly sweet, organic tang. I ran to Mrs. Henderson's room, 307. I pushed the door open, my heart in my throat. Please, let her be okay. She was still in her bed, thankfully. Her eyes were open, wide, and staring at the ceiling, but not at me. She was muttering something, her voice a weak, papery whisper. The petunias, they're wilting, they're bleeding. My flashlight beam flew upwards. Her ceiling was stained too, a sickening tableau of dark, spreading blotches. But it wasn't actively dripping above her. Not yet. Mrs. Henderson, I said, my voice urgent, but trying to stay calm. We need to go, right now. The hospital is evacuating. She didn't respond, just kept staring at the ceiling, her lips moving silently. Her eyes were unfocused, almost glazed over. It was like she was in a trance, or like she was seeing something I couldn't see. Something on the ceiling, in the blood. My gaze followed hers, trying to find what had captured her attention. There, on the ceiling tile, amidst the spreading stain, was a faint, swirling pattern. It looked like fingerprints, but too large, too distorted. And in the center of one of the patterns, for a split second, I saw something. A small, dark shimmer, just like in Dr. Armitage's office. A glint from something hidden, something alive, within the oozing darkness. A raw, primal fear seized me. It wasn't just physical contamination. It was affecting them mentally too. This wasn't merely a leak or a danger. It was an invasion, a horror beyond anything I'd ever imagined. Mrs. Henderson, we have to go, I repeated, more firmly this time. I grabbed her arm gently. Can you stand? We need to get you onto a gurney. She still didn't respond, her gaze fixed. Her skin felt strangely cold. I tried to pull her up, but she was surprisingly heavy, almost stiff. Too stiff. A wave of dread washed over me. I checked for a pulse. Nothing. My breath hitched. Not her too. Oh God, not her too. I stumbled back, my hands trembling. The blood on the ceiling above her seemed to deepen, to pulse with an unseen life. The realization hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just dripping, it was consuming. Whatever was on the third floor, whatever was seeping from the fourth, it was taking them. Not just killing them, but absorbing them. I couldn't help her anymore. I had to save the others. I had to save Sarah and Maria. I backed out of the room, my eyes sweeping the hallway. The other rooms, how many were affected? How fast was this thing spreading? I saw Maria and Sarah struggling with an elderly gentleman in a wheelchair a few doors down, Mr. Thompson. His room was also showing signs of the bloody seepage on the ceiling. They were having trouble getting him moving. He was confused and resisting. Leave him, I yelled, the words tearing from my throat, raw and desperate. We have to go, now. The nurses, too. Everyone get to the main stairs. Tell them to go to the first floor, out the main entrance. Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide with horror, surely understanding the implication of leaving patients behind. But then she looked at the ceiling, at the actively dripping goo, at the terrified, blank look on Mr. Thompson's face, and her resolve crumbled. She grabbed Maria's arm. "Come on, Maria," she shrieked. "Leave him. Alex is right. We have to go." They turned and ran, their figures disappearing around the corner towards the main stairwell. Good, they were moving. Now me. But as I turned to follow, a sound stopped me dead in my tracks. A slithering, a wet, dragging sound coming from the old elevator bank at the end of the hall. The one that was always out of service. My breath caught in my throat. My flashlight beam, still clutched in my trembling hand, swiveled towards the sound. The elevator doors, dark and aged, were slightly ajar. Just a crack. And from that crack, something was emerging. It wasn't a person. It wasn't an animal. It was a tendril, thick, dark, glistening like a rope of congealed blood, but impossibly long, impossibly fluid. It was retracting slowly from the blood-stained walls of the third floor, pulling itself back into the darkness of the elevator shaft. And as it moved, it made that sickening, wet, dragging sound. My stomach churned. It was the same substance as the drips, but it was moving. It was alive. My mind refused to process it. An insane, grotesque horror. But it was there, with my own eyes, just as Mrs. Henderson's eyes had been frozen on the ceiling. As the tendril disappeared into the elevator shaft, the doors slid shut with a soft, ominous thud. The silence that followed was even worse than the slithering. I didn't need to see more. I didn't need any more proof. My body moved on instinct, pure adrenaline driving me forward. I ran, not towards the main stairwell where Sarah and Maria had gone, but towards the fire escape. The fire escape on the third floor was rusty, rarely used, and it required a key card that I kept on my person for emergencies. It was not the main evacuation route, but it was closer. And more importantly, it was away from the elevator shaft. Away from whatever that thing was. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so violently I could barely insert the card. The metal door rattled as I pulled it open, the cold night air hitting my face like a slap. Never had external air felt so welcome. I scrambled out onto the narrow metal platform, my feet clumsy on the grate. Below me, 3 stories down, the hospital parking lot stretched out, empty save for a few stray cars. The silence out here was different, clearer, sharper. No more the throbbing hum of the building, no more the sickening squelch of whatever horrors were unfolding within its walls. I leaned against the brick, gasping for breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I was out. I was safe. For now. But then I looked back at the hospital. At the third floor where I'd just been. The lights in some of the patient rooms were still on, casting a sickly yellow glow on the windows. And on the brick facade below the window of Mr. Davies' room, where the dripping had been so violent, I saw it. A dark, broad stain creeping down the outside wall, just as it had crept down the inside walls. It was seeping through. My eyes followed the path of the stain. It was coming from the 4th floor, from Dr. Armitage's office. And as I watched, horrified, a fresh, viscous drip detached from the ceiling of the 4th floor window and began its slow, inevitable descent down the brick. It wasn't contained to the building. It wasn't just inside. It was trying to get out. The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through me, worse than anything I'd felt inside. This wasn't just a hospital emergency. This was something else, something ancient, something eldritch. The blood wasn't just leaking, it was growing, spreading. I pulled out my phone again, my fingers clumsy with fear. I had to call emergency services, the police, biohazard control. But what would I say? That the walls of St. Jude's Hospital were bleeding a living, conscious goo that was absorbing patients and spreading its way to the outside world. They'd laugh. They'd send me for a psych evaluation. I looked at my phone, at the contacts. Sarah. She was probably already out, hopefully with Maria. But what about Daniel on the first floor? What about the other nurses? Were they safe? I suddenly remembered Mrs. Henderson's unfocused gaze. The way she was staring at the ceiling, seeing something I couldn't. What if they hadn't just died? What if they were still part of it, assimilated into that horrific substance? My stomach churned, and I almost threw up over the side of the fire escape. The air, which moments ago had felt fresh, now carried that metallic, sweet, rotten scent, amplified by the fear. Was it in my clothes? On my skin? Had I just witnessed something truly apocalyptic? I forced myself to breathe, to think. I was a nurse. I was trained for emergencies. But this wasn't in any textbook. I decided to call my supervisor, Mark. He was a skeptical, by-the-book kind of guy. He'd demand explanations, logical explanations. But he would also initiate proper emergency protocols. He'd probably send some maintenance crew first, then security. It was the only way to get legitimate help to the building. I dialed his number, my thumb hitting the digits with surprising precision. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Each ring was an eternity. "Hello," Mark's sleepy, annoyed voice finally answered. "Alex, do you know what time it is? Is there an emergency on the floor?" "Mark," I choked out, my voice barely a whisper, yet filled with an urgency that seemed to penetrate his sleepy haze. "Mark, it's really bad. It's a biohazard. On the 3rd and 4th floors. We need a full evacuation, immediately, and riot police and hazmat." He was silent for a moment. Then, his voice sharp and suddenly awake. "Alex, what are you talking about? Biohazard? What kind of biohazard? Have you contained it?" "No," I said, tears pricking my eyes. "No, I don't think it can be contained. It's coming from the walls, from the building itself. It's like blood, but it's moving. It's taking people, Mark." There was another silence, even longer this time. I could almost hear his brain trying to reconcile what I was saying with anything he'd ever experienced. "Alex," he said slowly, his voice laced with concern. Are you feeling okay? Are you injured? Have you been exposed to anything?" "I'm not crazy, Mark," I screamed into the phone, the words raw with frustration. "Mr. Davies is dead. Mrs. Henderson is dead. The ceiling is dripping, bleeding, whatever it is, and it's spreading. I saw something in the elevator shaft, a tendril of it. It's alive." He sighed, a heavy, tired sound. "Alex, listen to me. I'm calling security. I'm calling the police. But I need you to calm down. Get off the fire escape. Go to the main lobby. Wait for them. Do you understand?" "No, you don't understand," I yelled, my voice cracking. "It's not just a leak. It's not just blood. It's something else. It's going to get out. It's going to spread beyond the hospital." "Alex, you're not making any sense," he said, his voice firming. taking on that supervisor tone. "Get to the lobby now. We'll sort this out. I'm coming in." He hung up just like that. He didn't believe me, or he couldn't. He thought I was in shock, that I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was, but it didn't change what I had seen, what I had felt. I stood there, shivering, the cold night air biting into my skin, but it was a cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was the icy grip of pure, unadulterated terror. I looked at the hospital again, the old brick building, a place of healing, of solace, of life. Now it was a monstrous, bleeding entity, a silent, festering wound on the fabric of the city. I knew I couldn't just stand there. I had to do something, alert someone. But who? My mind raced. The police would come. Security would come. But they wouldn't understand. They wouldn't know what they were dealing with. Treat it like a hazmat situation, a crime scene at best. They wouldn't know the true horror within. And what if it got to them? What if that thing was infectious? Not like a virus, but like a parasite, consuming and spreading. The horrifying image of Mr. Davies lifeless, with that grotesque goo dripping onto his chest, flashed in my mind. What if that's what it wanted? To absorb everything. I felt my sanity fraying at the edges. This was too much. This wasn't real. This was a nightmare. But the metallic, sickly sweet tang in the air, and the dark stains on the hospital wall below me were very, terrifyingly real. I descended the fire escape, my legs feeling like lead. I didn't want to go back inside, but I couldn't just leave. Not when I was the only one who seemed to grasp the true nature of whatever was happening. When my feet hit the ground, I didn't run. I walked, slowly, purposefully, towards the main entrance of St. Jude's. The familiar, sterile hospital doors shimmered under the faint streetlights. They looked inviting, almost normal. But I knew better. I knew the darkness that lurked inside. I pushed open the doors, my heart thudding a frantic rhythm. The lobby was quiet, mostly empty. A few security guards, their faces grim, were already receiving calls. One of them, a bulky man named Frank, saw me and his eyes widened. "Alex, what happened up there? Mark just called. He said you were hysterical." I ignored his tone. "Frank, you need to seal off the building. Don't let anyone in or out. It's not just a leak. It's sentient. It's infecting everything." He stared at me, then at my blood-stained scrubs, his confusion warring with concern. "Infecting what? Alex, you're scaring me. We've got emergency services on the way. They're preparing for a full lockdown. But we need to know what we're locking down for." "For something that's alive," I whispered, my gaze fixed on the ceiling of the lobby. Was it spreading? Was it already down here? The ceiling tiles seemed normal, but I was paranoid. Every shadow seemed to writhe, every stain seemed to deepen. Just then, my phone rang. It was Sarah. My heart leaped. "Sarah, are you out? Are you safe?" Her voice was a ragged sob. "Alex, we made it out. But Daniel, he went back inside. He said he heard something, a cry for help, from the 4th floor. He said it sounded like Dr. Armitage." My blood froze. Dr. Armitage. The man whose office had been the source of the initial seepage. The man the strange tendril had seemed to be absorbing. "No," I breathed, my voice barely audible. "No, Sarah, he can't go back in there. It's too late." "He's already gone," Sarah choked out. "He said he was going to verify, to see if he could help." "Oh God, Alex, What is happening? I looked at Frank, his face still etched with concern, still not understanding the true danger. Frank, you said you locked down the building. He nodded, confused. Yeah, Alex. Fire department and hazmat are en route. They'll be here any minute. We'll set up a perimeter. Then why? I said, my voice cold, my gaze fixed on the main set of double doors to my left, the ones that swung out into the street. Are the emergency doors on the far side of the building wide open? Frank whirled around, his eyes snapping to the mentioned doors. They were indeed ajar, letting in a gust of cold night air and a sliver of darkness. They shouldn't be, he muttered, reaching for his radio. That's impossible. We locked all exterior doors. But I knew that was no human error. That was no mistake. It was open because whatever was inside was getting out. It was no longer contained. And I knew what it looked for. Fresh targets, fresh hosts. My eyes darted to the dark, open doors. Then to Frank, still trying to radio someone, unaware of the immediate, terrifying threat. I didn't hesitate. I had to warn people, even if they thought I was crazy, even if they thought I was hallucinating. This was beyond the hospital. This was something else entirely. I ran past Frank, past the baffled security guards, towards the open doors. The cold night air felt different now, no longer a relief, but a harbinger of doom. I burst out onto the street, my lungs burning, the hospital a looming, silent monster behind me. And as I ran, my eyes went to the skyline of the sleeping city. All those apartment buildings, all those houses, all those people, safe in their beds, oblivious. St. Jude's wasn't just bleeding, it was spreading, and I was the only one who seemed to know. My only hope was to somehow convince someone, anyone, before it was too late for all of us. But how do you convince the world that a hospital is bleeding, and that the bleeding is alive? My heart pounded, not just with fear, but with a terrifying, new, and desperate resolve. This was only the beginning.